In around 2006, Guillermo del Toro and Matthew Robbins were trying to get their adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's novella At the Mountains of Madness made. They couldn't get Warner Brothers to finance the project because of the cost and the tone of the story. They reportedly didn't like how it didn't have a happy ending or a love story, like traditional Hollywood blockbusters. 4 years later, it was resurrected with James Cameron as producer, Tom Cruise to star, and at Universal Studios. However, they wouldn't greenlight the project due to Del Toro's insistence on it being R-rated, and they wanted it to be PG-13. Very similar to Verbinski's Bioshock movie that never happened. So then, he went to Legendary Pictures and tailored the script so it could be rated PG-13, trying hard to be terrifying, but the budget would still remain the same. Despite the change in tone, it was ultimately cancelled. Another thing that could also feed into the cancellation is that around the time that this was supposed to start filming, Prometheus was released, and that had very similar ideas to At the Mountains of Madness. With that, I found a script, but it doesn't have a date on it, so I don't know if this was the initial draft back in 2006 or the later PG-13 draft. But due to the content, it's assumed that it's the original R-rated draft. Here we go. Tasmania, October 1939. Fishermen discover a whaler named the Arkham. Patrolmen go aboard. The ship is in complete disarray. There's water everywhere. They find a crazed, old, and disgusting man locked in a room from the inside. He goes nuts with an axe. Gets shot. Cut to Hobart Docks with people stocking up the HMS Moonstone. Introduced is Alan Starkweather, the captain. He and his warrant officer climb into a Bentley. They talk about the Arkham, and the chauffeur hands them documents and some film. Cut to the hospital with the madman. Starkweather then tries to speak with him but doesn't want to deal with him. He mentions Antarctica, but the crazed man warns him, "Don't go." Then, strange things crawl under his skin and tentacles shoot out of his face and chest. Then he's back to normal. He's raving mad. He was 25 when the expedition first left in September of 1930. Then it cuts to a flashback with all of the professors before the expedition, and the crazed man named Dyer is healthy and good-looking. He's pleading with his pregnant wife who doesn't want him to go. He is ready to leave with her and tells his superior, Professor Lake, who lets him go, but tells him he needs to show him something. He shows him in his office a giant fossil of an unknown creature. Dyer decides to stay with the expedition as his wife leaves. October 1930, the Antarctic Circle, the Arkham. Everyone is getting mail, Dyer gets nothing. We go around the ship and everything is normal and in order. Cameramen are introducing some dog handlers. Cut to outside. People getting fossils by drilling. November 1930, same location. Lots of equipment. Finding fossils of ancient marine life. They continue, but it's nothing like the original fossil Lake and Dyer saw. Lake is still obsessed with finding something like it. Worshipping it, almost. New Year's Eve, 1931. Still in the circle, enjoying themselves. Captain warns of mirages. Also, communications are down. Dyer's wife died in childbirth, as well as the baby. Lake doesn't tell him, though. Both ships are in heavy fog. They are on the edge of the earth. The fossil is vibrating like a homing beacon. Dyer has a dream about his wife, which turns into a nightmare, a tundra, and Dyer sees a figure. He wakes up. He sees he's thin, pale, and has long nails. Sees other crewmates sleeping, but the food is old and rotting. He goes up to the deck. No one is there, still covered in thick fog. The ship's hull is cut. Water starts rushing in, washing away the crew. The dog handler, Larson, tries to save his dogs. A derrick hits Dyer, bleeding in the air. Dyer is soon saved by another professor. Frost encompasses the ship while instruments are going crazy. They are at the Mountains of Madness. Land unseen by human eyes. Dreamlike mountains, jagged peaks and valleys. Dreamlike mountains, jagged peaks and valleys, low slanting sunbeams, volcanoes smoking, all under a purplish sky. The cameraman is filming. Everyone is in awe. Starkweather is watching the footage. Incomprehensible geometric shapes made by something not human on top of the mountains. The crew is chipping away at the outside of the ship. Dyer gets stitches. The ice is growing like ivy. Cut to the lab. Several professors trying to make the drill work. Dyer notices that the watches have stopped. Everyone confirms. The date reads January 28th at 6:14, which is weeks away. The drill works, but Dyer is worried. A strange inhuman voice is heard on the radio, mocking their cries for help. The thing that pierced the hole was an 8-foot-tall green obelisk with runes on it. Penguins are seen, but they are strange and otherworldly looking. The drill picks up rune-covered monoliths, and they study them. Lake manages to crack one open, only to find green liquid and a creature resembling the fossil they found. Everyone is petrified except for Lake. A man looks for a book and sees one with a strange monster on it. Sees engravings of the creatures they found, cut in half. They've done the same to the creature they found, with all the monoliths open. They have wings, 3 eyelids, and a large cranial cavity, indicating intelligent creatures. Storm is a-brewing. Captain wants everyone back on board. A scientist named Fowler leaves with some of the green liquid, and Dyer and Lake continue to dissect. Fowler hears strange noises in the fog. They continue to dissect, and they are constantly disturbed at what they find. One of the specimens heals itself from the autopsy. Back to Larson and a man named Gunnarsson. They have a weird confrontation with the albino penguins. Fog is all around them. A dog is cut in half, and the intestines have become tentacles. Gunnarsson becomes fused with the dog. Larson goes further into the fog. He sees the Miskatonic partially frozen under the ice. The Gunnarsson thing tries to fuse with Larson, but he manages to escape underwater. He disappears under the ice. It's insinuated that these beings are aliens and are called the Old Ones. The leather-bound book describes the Old Ones and is a translation of the Necronomicon. The scientists try to figure out the beings, and their concept of reality, time, and space is changing. They think they need to go to the tops of the mountains where the strange buildings are. Everything can change. Lake tells Dyer to get a box on his desk before they take off. It's the message about his wife and child. Dyer punches Lake in the face and beats the shit out of him until someone grabs him and takes him off of Lake. Dyer decides not to go, as he thinks Lake has gone crazy for the pursuit of knowledge. They take off. They see so much from up in the air, with cracks in the ice, the water, and the Arkham. Gunnarsson is watching them from the ground, naked, armless, translucent, deformed, swollen, and disgusting looking. Not too far from the Arkham, either. Both planes are partly destroyed from the jagged mountain tops. One's fuel tank gets sliced, and the other gets part of the landing gear taken off. They continue to fly, but the plane with the destroyed fuel tank is going down with nowhere to land. What they see is alien architecture and the strangest towers, spires, and rooftops. They manage to land on a smooth slab of ice, but their landing is chaotic and rough to say the least. The pilot is dead. The city on top of the mountains is larger than life. Or should I say, death. Back to the Arkham, they find Gunnarsson. Dyer is in a depression. Fowler needs his help, but he isn't moving. However, Dyer soon decides to help. Cut to the infirmary with Gunnarsson, who is showing early signs of hypothermia, but it turns out he's just very bruised. He changes his face in the darkness. Cut back to the city. The professors say a prayer for the pilot while Lake investigates. He sees ancient writings about how the Shoggoths built these cities for the Old Ones, then rebelled and worshipped a deity that even the Old Ones were afraid of, Cthulhu. Cut back to the infirmary, Gunnarsson is absorbing sailors. The second pilot and a character named McTighe are talking with one another over the radio. They find out about being further time displaced, with them thinking they were only gone for half an hour, when the crew states that they've been gone for 11 hours. But he kinda suspected it at this point. The captain gives them a plan to fly them all back with a little bit of cargo and in 2 groups. Before they can continue further, the Gunnarsson thing bursts in and starts attacking the captain and everyone else in the room. Cut to Dyer and Fowler. They try to experiment but feel like something strange is going on. He sees a man from sickbay, notices he's strange. They go out to do their experiment. Fowler tries to contact Captain Douglas, but all he hears is a strange voice. Dyer is in another part of the lab, and Fowler is alone with the monoliths of the Old Ones who soon attack him. Dyer hears noises. He soon sees the Old Ones almost dissecting Fowler. Dyer screams and bolts outside. On the ice field, men are screaming and shooting. Gunnarsson is absorbing more things. It confronts the Old One and tries to absorb it. Dyer then goes back to the tent and sees Larson alive. Dyer starts doing what Larson is doing, packing up. They head to a dog sled, and Larson is shooting anything in sight. They get out of there. The Arkham is chaotic. They go towards the mountains. Cut back to the city. They're deciding on who to go on the plane first. Cut back to Larson and Dyer racing over the ice field towards the mountains. Larson looks like he knows more than he's letting on. They get into an ice cave, one that Larson found earlier. He's been doing stuff on his own throughout the ordeal. Dyer then comes face to face with the albino penguins. Larson is sick of his blubbering, so he shoots one and goes to sleep and urges Dyer to do so as well. Lake ultimately decides to stay on the mountain, so the cameraman, Gedney, could go with his brother, Pip. But it's really to further observe the city than it being the right thing to do. Before they leave, Lake grabs the Necronomicon and tells them to tell Dyer he's sorry. Truly. Once they leave, Lake gathers the men and some climbing equipment. Cut back to Larson and Dyer. Dyer continues the dream he had before. The figure is in the ice field. It is a hooded figure that is just a screaming void, and he then wakes up. He has some terrible breakfast and begins to help Larson with the ammunition, which is replacing some of the ammo with salt, as that's what hurts them. There's a rumble. Larson tells him not to move. It's a Shoggoth. They luckily don't get noticed. They notice the plane. They can't land. The people on the Arkham are like statues, staring at the plane. They land roughly. The things go for them. The pilot gets out and he realizes what the crew has become. The professors hear a scream. Gunnarsson opens the door to the plane. They're relieved for a little bit. Then another Gunnarsson goes to the window. They notice there are many of them. They surround the plane, trying to escape, but they can't. But they soon open the emergency exit a little bit. Pip gets out, then Danforth. Pip tries to help his brother when he realizes he's a thing and it absorbs him. Danforth, Atwood, and Daniels manage to escape. A growing blob of faces, things, and appendages chases after them with thing foot soldiers. They head to the Arkham. Dyer and Larson meet up with them. Larson checks if they're things or not by giving them salt. Danforth and Atwood are human, but Daniels was infected, so Larson shoots him. Back to the city, Lake and the professors head to a biology room. Lake is astounded by the technology, as well as a massive structure of animal bones petrified together. From dinosaurs to birds to mammals to crustaceans. One takes a sample. Lake states it is all life on Earth in one structure. The old ones created them. They are God. A human skeleton is found as well. They go into another room, with machinery in a room bigger than the Colosseum. Different types of machinery, energy, and technology that is beyond their years. A professor named Rope gets killed by getting his life force sucked out of him by the time distortion, which they find out is coming from this room. Lake tries to work a machine, and he soon receives massive amounts of information about the history of the old ones. The creation of life, the prime of the city, the war of the Shoggoths and the old ones, and something rising out of the water. Lake, now knowing what he knows, tries to warn them, but he isn't making any sense. The Shoggoths want to bring about their god, something worse than the old ones, which is Cthulhu. A Shoggoth kills one of the professors. More of them appear, and they snatch up 2 more professors. Lake hides, thinking he's safe, but he gets devoured too. Cut to Dyer, Larson, Danforth, and Atwood. They're looking down at the Arkham, which is on fire on the outside, as well as the albino penguins who seem to be waiting for something. The fire is melting the ice, so the Arkham can get free and go back to where it came from, and they might infect the world. They realize they have to stop them before doing so they plan to blow it up. They go to the Miskatonic for dynamite. Some of it crumbles because of the time distortion, but about a third of it is good. They explore the ship. Atwood finds a Bible in a chapel where he finds Lake, now a thing. He starts to pray, but he tells him that the old ones created him, not God, so now there is no point. They created them out of boredom, not any existential reason. Lake soon absorbs him, possibly, as a shot is heard. We then cut to the rest of the group, scouring the Miskatonic to see if there's anything they can use. When they see Atwood, we're unsure if he's a thing or not. They then prepare. End of flashback. We see the older Dyer with Starkweather sitting with him in a greenhouse. A consul wants him to leave now, but Starkweather wants to hear the rest of the story. Back to the flashback, and while working on the dynamite, Dyer hears chanting and takes a shotgun. The men things, now one big organism, chanting to Cthulhu. It's a ritual and strange things starts to happen. Dyer tells them to blow it now. Cut to Larson setting up the dynamite when Atwood tries to stop him, as he's a thing. Larson then blows up the Miskatonic with him and Atwood inside. The things get off the ship and the rest board the Arkham. The creatures are dying from the salt water. Danforth shoots and kills a thing. He gets thrown near a gap and is dangling over nothingness. The thing tries to get at him, but Dyer manages to kill it and pulls him up. They get to the Arkham with every single thing trying to stop them. A few close calls with the Shoggoth, but Dyer manages to kill it, only for it to squirm and grow. Then Cthulhu roars and rises from the depths. They're running on the ship with creatures getting killed with salt water. Cthulhu picks up the ship and crushes it. Danforth and Dyer hold on for dear life. Cthulhu throws it away, it lands, and water starts rushing in. Shoggoths keep dying. They lock themselves in a room. Danforth sees Cthulhu and something else. He won't say what, though. A Shoggoth takes the form of Lake and states to Dyer it's the future, what Danforth saw. He has seen him before, in his dreams. The Dark Man, the embodiment of everyone and all knowledge. Lake then attacks Danforth with protoplasm. Dyer manages to kill the creature, but the plasm is still growing on his arm. Danforth asks Dyer to kill him, and he eventually does so, crying and broken. Then he sees the knob turning and opening, and we see the opening from the movie, but from Dyer's perspective. We then cut back to Dyer and Starkweather, who doesn't believe his story. He leaves with Dyer screaming about the truth, and how the Titan is going to kill them all. Starkweather is at the docks, ready to go. The Moonstone goes off into Antarctic waters. Starkweather gets a notice how Dyer hanged himself. Starkweather and team are in the circle, investigating the tents and equipment from the previous expedition. Starkweather comes out of the tent and with no one around. He calls. No one answers. Then, a lone hooded figure comes through the fog and the two men are alone in the tundra, dwarfed by the Mountains of Madness. Then, a superimposed image of Revelations 5:19 appears on the screen. And at the end of days will come a man that walks like a man, looks like a man, but is not a man. Fade to black. I will say, out of all the scripts, this one is probably the best. It's not my favorite, as that honor still goes to Friday the 13th 3D, but with this, it's definitely the best written and very much trying to make that very surreal Lovecraftian tone come to life. I do wish that we could have gotten this movie instead of Ridley Scott's mediocre at best Prometheus, because while reading, you do very much get those similarities. A bunch of scientists going to a place foreign to them to look for answers about something, with only them finding out that their entire existence is a lie, and their creators aren't who they think they are, as well as finding out their creators don't exactly care about them. But with Prometheus, it was written by overrated jack-off shit-stained Damon Lindelof, who couldn't write something good to save his life, with The Leftovers being a fluke. While At the Mountains of Madness was written by one of the most celebrated writer-directors of the current era, so there's that as well. But with this, it would have still been very difficult to make this from script to screen, and not just because of Prometheus, but because it's very hard to make very Eldritch/Lovecraftian ideas and stories that isn't just in written form. Actually seeing with your own two eyes the horror that's going on isn't in tune with Lovecraft's stories, mainly because the whole basis of his stories is not seeing what these unfathomable horrors are. It's all in your head, what you imagine up, which is much more terrifying. While I think Del Toro and Robbins managed to do the surreal vision of the detached reality all these characters are feeling, it's still a bit too realistic with trying to tell a story. But it would have to be that since this was envisioned as a big Hollywood blockbuster, and you can't do experimental ideas or else you won't make your money back. With going back to that idea, look at all the Lovecraftian adaptations over the years. They're either obscure indie flicks, terrible, or only taking some of those ideas, then reinterpreting them in their own way. Much like John Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy, which is drenched in eldritch themes and ideas, mainly The Thing and In the Mouth of Madness, but Prince of Darkness has that influence as well. And look at all those movies. All of them were box office bombs and had negative reception. Another reason why these movies can't really work. His stories aren't mainstream enough, and I don't think you could make them mainstream. It's just too weird for a general populace. With all that though, I still think it would have been great to see. Just for me personally, because you could definitely tell that there's a lot of influence from The Thing. I mean, using the term thing is right there in the script, which is great in its own right, as well as the fact that I would like to see more Lovecraft adaptations, despite what I said before. They can't really work, but despite that, I'd still like to see them because I love that surreal nature to it. It's a genuinely great script, and I do urge everyone watching to try and read it. The unseen horrors await you.